That is what we talk about here on Birds 365. McMullen and McDonald, joined by our pal, Scott Grayson from Fox 29, who, much like the Prince of Darkness yesterday, Bob Groach, doing the mobile drop-in with us. Where are you off to, Grayson?
Yeah, just working the dad job today. Got to drop my daughter off at Girl Scout camp, and then I get the joy of going home and working on the old to-do list.
Just like quarterback, Netflix's quarterback. A lot of being a dad and that. Yeah, people forget people have dual roles. Scott Grayson, not just in front of the camera all the time. You got to do the heavy lifting, help out on the home front. What have you checked out any of Netflix's quarterback just yet? Just dropped yesterday.
Yeah, I've only seen a couple of clips from it. I have not yet seen a show, but I think it's great, all the stuff they're doing to get you guys behind the scenes more and more. It seems like that's where sports media is going these days, right? Get you behind the scenes of things that we don't normally get to see, or what the relationships are like. I loved in the All-Star game, for example, in baseball, they had so many guys mic'd up during the game, right? It's an exhibition. Let's have fun with it. I thought that really made it more enjoyable. So the quarterbacks thing, for sure, I'm definitely going to check out, because I think it is great to kind of see these guys off the field, away from the intensity that you get there, and see them in their lives a little more.
Now, I was both happy and disappointed yesterday when John McMullen texted me and saw the tweet that said the New York Jets are going to be the team on Hard Knocks this year. I'm still a Jet fan from my New York days, so I'm very much interested to see if the very happy Aaron Rodgers, who seems to be living the New York life, continues to when the HBO cameras are in his face. Should be interesting. But I was kind of hoping it was the Eagles, because I thought it would be a good thing. They've got a lot of colorful personalities on the team. They're coming off a Super Bowl appearance. I thought they could boost their brand. And McMullen kept telling me, you got no shot, Jody. Yeah, just stop, Jody. There's no way Nick Sirianni is letting those cameras into the locker room, Jody. It ain't happening, Jody. They protect their information like it's state secrets, Jody. Are they right to do that?
I don't think they're right to do that, because I think it really needs to spread around to every team. However, you got to look at the weight of the owners and what, I mean, I think more than Nick Sirianni, it's probably Jeffrey Lurie that's wanting to protect all the state secrets and all that stuff. And
Johnny Mac would disagree with you. J Mac, tell him who's the reason why the Eagles aren't on Hard Knocks.
Well, as I explained to Jody, if you give it to the marketing people like Don Smolenski, they'd be all for it. They'd be, yeah, let's increase our vision, but Nick doesn't want those cameras around, and sure. Jeffrey's more of, he's a good owner. He's going to defer to his coach for the most part. And maybe at some point the Eagles are forced onto it, like the Jets. But it's notable that the Jets, it was forced on the Jets because nobody wants to volunteer. Nobody wants to do it. It's not just the Eagles.
Yeah.
I do think it's comical that they act like nobody else knows what they're doing. Everybody gets the film. Everybody sees it. It's not a secret, but for whatever reason, especially with younger coaches. We had Bob Angelo on, who worked at NFL Films, was on the ground floor of Hard Knocks, Scott. And he said Brian Billick was the first, Baltimore was the first Hard Knocks. Brian Billick was the head coach. He embraced it. He embraced it back then, trying to get the Ravens, who were a very good team at the time, more on the national radar, was very comfortable with himself. I don't know. Maybe it's because of social media. Maybe coaches get a lot of criticism. And as you can imagine, everything is parsed. Everything is second guessed. They don't want that. I don't blame them. But I think a lot of young coaches are like that.
I agree with you, because I think we all have stories from earlier days in our careers where coaches and for me, it was like Joe Paterno when I was covering Penn State. On the road, they'd have the media up, and there was a whole thing. Anything he talked about in there was off the record, but it was all the media interacting with him, and it was all a way to bridge that gap between coach and media, right? So you had that little respect that sort of brewed. You don't get that anymore because because as you pointed out, John, everybody is so afraid of the social media implications. And once it's out there, it can't be taken back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is kind of a balancing act, and I just happen to be a fan of the show. Maybe that's why I'm overly invested in Hard Knocks, even to a day like today. All right, so no Hard Knocks for the Eagles, but they will report in under 2 weeks now, Scott Grayson, and you, like John McMullen, with your camera will get about 47 seconds to be able to videotape whatever. What do you think this camp is going to be like? Nick Sirianni's third, some pretty good roster turnover. Year 1 to year 2, made the playoffs, got beat badly out this year, all the way to the Super Bowl, tied with 10 seconds to go. What do you think the feel is when they let you guys into camp for the first time with this group going forward with 2023?
Well, I think every time you take the field, you want to try to build on the year before. But the only way to build on last year is to actually come home with the Lombardi. So, but that being said, I really think that with the veteran leadership in this group, you look at I mean, Jason Kelce came back because he wants to win one more time, and he feels this team can do it. So what does that say? That says the leadership from the top down in terms of players is going to set the tone early, I got to believe, with some of these younger guys that came in via the draft and new free agents that came in a little bit here. That look, there's unfinished business we've got to take care of, and that's going to be, I think, the tone with which training camp will go. I don't think the coaches are really going to have to do a whole lot of motivating here, but you've got new coordinators, and to me, I think there's a little bit of learning that needs to take place in terms of what they're trying to install, how they're going to be a little different from what was here. But to me, my thing is Jody, I really want to see these young players. I want to see, Nolan Smith. I want to see how much he was really crunching that playbook in the off season. I want to see DeAndre Carter. Is he really here to work? I mean, he's looked good so far. It seems like everything with the little bit we've seen is that he is here to actually show. Everybody passed on him for the wrong reasons, and they're going to pay the price for that. I want to see Nakobe Dean. I want to see him really take that step forward to really assert himself at that linebacker position. And, and I want to see the competition at running back. I mean, to me, those three guys, Kenny Gainwell, Rashad Penny, and DeAndre Swift, I got to believe that's going to be a fun competition to watch a little bit for who's going to get the carries or the bulk of them. I mean, they're all going to get their turn. But how's that going to play out? And then you throw in Boston Scott as well. I think there's a lot of things in this camp that are going to be a little bit of fun to watch, but I expect the tone to be unfinished business. Let's go get what we left in Arizona last year.
Scott, history is not kind to Super Bowl losers the next season. I think, what's the number, Jody? 8 have made it back. 3 have won.
Only
the Super
3 have
Bowl.
won.
And that's a pretty big sample size after 57 Super Bowls. However, the closer I get to training camp, I think it's going to be more difficult for the Eagles because of the turnover, the 5 defensive starters, the losing the coordinators. I think there's going to be hiccups. But boy, the NFC side of the docket stinks on paper, Scott. In other words, I think they're going to have growing pains, but ultimately they're going to get better and better, even though it's on paper, it looks easier early, and you have that sort of murderer's row on the schedule later in the season. Then you kind of finish up again with some easy games on paper. But I think the Eagles are going to be better late than early as they sort of iron things out. And I think the fact that the rest of the NFC is so bad on paper is going to give them an opportunity to iron things out. Whereas if they were on the AFC side, I tell you today, there's no way they're making it back to the Super Bowl. Thoughts on that?
I think, John, you and I are living in kind of the same mindset. Everything I like about the Eagles, and then you say history says this, right? Obviously, as you guys pointed out. Now, there's reasons why. I mean, you got an extra playoff spot now. It's easier, you could argue, to get back, now than it used to be. The training camp, the offseason isn't the 3-a-days. They're not there. The 2-a-days, they're not there. They keep players healthier and ready to go earlier in the season. But I'm with you, John. I think the AFC is a bloodbath. And it's going to be fun to watch because it doesn't affect this team in terms of conference playoffs much. But, you know, you look at the NFC and you go, who's going to challenge this team? Don't give me the 49ers. I mean, you have to give them the 49ers, but they're still living in the past. I mean, we keep hearing that every week. It's when are they going to get over what happened last year? And you look at the Cowboys, right? Well, the Cowboys, you know, my feel, we talk about it all the time. I'm going to get it in here again. Mike McCarthy's a buffoon. And as long as he's coaching that team, I just don't see them getting over the hump. Now, will it be a good, potentially a fun race for the division title? Yeah, it could be. But I think ultimately this Eagles team, and what I like what Howie's done is not only does he have talent, but he has talent and depth. In most positions. It's not a perfect thing, and it's hard to have anything perfect in this league with the salary cap. But there's a lot to like with this roster. And it makes you say, you know, and there's a lot of veterans with that mentality I talked about, unfinished business. And you got a young guy at quarterback who feels that way, is never satisfied. It trickles down. And all those reasons make me say maybe this team will be one of those that bucks that trend and gets back there and potentially wins it.
Scott, it is almost amazing, John, and I notice every once in a while, how little we talk about Jalen Hurts this year. Last year, it was the only thing we talked about. Oh, they didn't get Russell Wilson. They tried to get Deshaun Watson. Is Jalen Hurts going to be able to improve? And he had one of the largest jumps ever in ranking at his position in 1 year as I've ever seen in the National Football League. So now he's become like this given. Got the big contract. All is well. We got our guy. So we don't even look at Jalen Hurts. And for the most part, I agree with it because he had the year that he did, and he is the young man that he is. Here's my only concern, and it's probably a bit of a stretch or a reach. Tell me that I'm reading too much into it. Is Jalen Hurts going to put his work in? Of course he is. Is Jalen Hurts going to get himself trouble being out and having too much fun or doing something that gets him into? No, I'd have no fear of that whatsoever. But because he was so good and because he had that meteoric rise, everybody, and when I say everybody, I'm not just talking football fans, I'm talking Madison Avenue and media outlets. And everybody wants a piece of Jalen Hurts. Why? Because he's one of the best guys to talk about in the National Football League with the year he had and the personality that he has. Between endorsements and media obligations and dinners and accolades and charities and the like, is there a chance that Jalen Hurts gets spread a little too thin this year?
You know, I think it's a legit question to ask, right? But I think this is the kind of guy who isn't worried about another $1 million for that endorsement or another $1 million for that endorsement. When it comes time in the season, I think he is going to say, no, I need to protect my time. I need to protect my time to be ready for what's coming. You know, I didn't anticipate that angle of that question, but I like it, Jody. It's a good thought, right? Because this guy's a leader, and in coming on here, I was thinking we're going to talk about Jalen Hurts at some point, I'm sure. But this guy's built different, man. He's just built different, and you see it every time. But man, isn't it? It is funny, the snapshot from 1 year ago to now that you pointed out. Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, Dallas Goedert the other day said that Jalen Hurts is one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the league, and he's not number 2.
He's not 2, yeah.
Yeah, and so you look at the respect this guy got in 1 full year, and I just don't see this guy letting anything get in the way of success on the field. So if he thinks he can go do something, and maybe he'll just load up his bye week and do a lot of that stuff. I don't think he'll let that stuff be a distraction. I really don't, because, you know, and I'll give you this. Everybody wanted to see, well, how will he handle the Super Bowl distractions? I thought he handled it glowingly. And he came out and had a great game. I mean, he would have been MVP if the Eagles won the game, no doubt. No, I think I like the question. I like the angle. I think it's an interesting thought. I don't think he'll have any trouble at all managing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there, Scott, because, you know, the one thing we never questioned Jalen Hurts when it came to the intangibles. In fact, I often thought it was kind of weird because that's what you're usually worried about with top tier quarterbacks in the NFL. You're like, Well, I know he's got the talent. But does he have the other stuff? Does he have the intangibles? With Jalen, it was, all right, he has the intangibles. Jeffrey Lurie, the most mature 24-year-old we've ever met, which I've said that, I think, before Jeffrey said it. He's more mature than me at my age, never mind when I was 24. He's incredibly mature. But did he have the NFL sort of skill set to be a top tier quarterback? And he's proven that in spades as well. It's really an amazing story from where he's gone. And people like to blame the media. They like to blame me, Jody, Scott Grayson. We're haters, blah, blah, blah. We didn't tell the Eagles to call, Deshaun Watson's agent or Russell Wilson's agent. They weren't convinced either last offseason. And now they're handing out $255 million, and they're not even concerned about it. They're like, typically, doesn't matter who you are. When you sign these big deals, you start going, is so-and-so going to change at all? You don't even worry about that with Jalen Hurts. It's really kind of amazing that he's become this given, and we're like, all right, we got this to worry about, this to worry about, this to worry about, this to worry about. No worries at all at the quarterback. It's kind of amazing.
It really is. And with the contract, I mean, my first thought as it started coming up was, I mean, it really wasn't that long ago. You just gave out a lot of money to a guy who has since been traded multiple times. And as last I checked, isn't even on a roster right now in Carson Wentz. So, but they didn't hesitate to get this deal done because of the kind of character he is, the role model he is, the leader that he is, all the things you want in a starting franchise quarterback. He has it. But now he's got to back it up this year. And so, okay, how does he do that? Well, I want to see how they kind of manage him a little bit more. What kind of things and discussions did they have in the offseason when they were watching film and they saw, his runs, his decision-making on when he pulls it down? I've always liked his ability at this point to not be afraid to throw it away rather than tuck it and run for 1 yard and take a hit most of the time. But he's got to get a little better at you're too valuable now, right? Like, I want to see a little more selective in terms of the runs, but that's such a big part of his game. How do you hamper that? But there's like a fine line to walk there. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Nick tries to manage that with him. And you've got these running backs back there now. You've got a stable of running backs that are, when healthy, one of the probably best groups of running backs in the league. And I'm curious to see how this offense unfolds. You got one football that you got to feed a lot of guys who want it. And he's got to manage those personalities as well as the leader of that offense. So I think there's challenges for him this year, including what Jody mentioned off the field. But I'm looking forward to seeing how the team and he navigate that. And I think they got the right guy for the job.
And the other thing the Eagles and Jalen have going for them is they got the deal done. Coming into this offseason, there were a bunch of quarterbacks we knew contracts needed to be extended or agreed to and the like. Two of them got done. Jalen first, which helped set the market for Lamar Jackson. And, oh, by the way, Joe Burrow and Herbert have not signed yet. We thought they would fall in order, but it hasn't happened just yet. So those teams have to deal with that stuff during the preseason. The Eagles do not, because Jalen should be a happy young man with the kind of contract that he signed. You referenced the backs and the stable of backs that they now have. Everybody's guessing and projecting and predicting what's going to happen with the Eagles running back this year. I think we're all of the same mindset. No one guy is going to come in here and just take over the way that Miles Sanders had to carry the ball as much or more than Miles Sanders did. So it's going to be by committee. How do you think the committee shapes up?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I'm excited to watch that part of training camp in the first couple of games to see. I don't think everybody kind of puts Kenny Gainwell behind Swift and Penny, but the Eagles started giving Gainwell towards the end of the season more and more of a workload. I think partly because they knew they were going to be moving on from Miles Sanders most likely, and they wanted to see what he could do, if he could handle it. And I thought Gainwell did pretty well. So where will he fall in those three? I don't necessarily know. Gainwell finishes third in that mix. I think I'm most if I had to rank them right now in my mind, I would probably go Swift 1, Penny 2, Gainwell 3, but I think Gainwell is right there. Here's the thing, and it's the big qualifier, is you got to stay healthy. And I think what Howie did was bought insurance with all those guys so that when one goes down, right, you blow one tire on the car, you're fine as long as you have a spare. You don't want to lose 2 or 3 of those guys because the car won't move anymore at that point. But I think they're good, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that competition shakes out. And they all have a little bit of a different skill set, but behind that offensive line, I don't think it matters who actually is carrying the ball. They should be able to move the chains pretty well, as long as that line stays healthy. To me, that's a bigger key than the backs. Is if the line stays healthy, those guys will produce. Doesn't matter which one gets the ball. And I think for Nick, it's going to be more of a massaging that to keep that room happy, right? One week it's probably going to be one guy more than another. Maybe the next week it's another guy over that one guy. And but in my mind, I'm probably most excited to see DeAndre Swift behind this line. But I think Rashad Penny could be primed for a big year if he's able to be healthy and really produce the way I think he can.
I'm more concerned about the running back position than most. For whatever reason, I think, people didn't give Miles Sanders his flowers here last season. 1,269 yards, career year. You mentioned the end of the season. That didn't have to do with Kenny. Miles was playing through an injury, which I think people don't realize. He's playing with a knee brace. He was fighting through it, so they tried to manage him a little bit. And then he had the first play in the Super Bowl, which was a bad play, and he hurt himself. And I think because of that, we talk about the defense, number 2 overall, but they didn't play well in the Super Bowl. Everything gets blown up because it's the Super Bowl. He had a great season is what I'm trying to say, Miles Sanders. And the assumption that, they're going to replace that. I think, boy, I don't know. I think people are going too quickly to that end game. DeAndre Swift, tremendous talent. Never had more than, I think, 617 yards rushing in this league. 3 years now. Rashad Penny, as you mentioned, tremendous talent. Always hurt. I mean, that's the issue there. I don't know. I think, and maybe the Eagles deserve the benefit of the doubts, but I think people are dismissing what Miles Sanders brought to this team last season, acknowledging the offensive line is the best in football. The quarterback helps the running back. He was still darn good, Miles Sanders, last year.
I agree with you. He was good. But I think you get a little bit of the chicken and the egg argument, and you kind of referenced it at the end there, John, right? Was Miles a product of the line? Was he a product of the run threat in the RPO that Jalen brought? And how much of it was Miles? And I think we're going to find a little bit of that out as we go through this season, because if the production's very similar here, then this starts to become a bit of a plug and play over the next couple of years, in the sense that you put anybody with, any kind of talent back there, they're going to put up 1,200 yards rushing. It's going to be less as long as these guys stay healthy, because they're just going to share the workload a little bit more. But that position as a whole, I think, is probably going to put up about those numbers. And I think a lot of Miles' success was due to, I think it was the threat that Jalen provided and the RPO behind the talent of the offensive line, and not to take away from what Miles had. But what I'm hoping that you get from these backs is the ability to break the big one. Miles sometimes struggled when he got free to get the 70-yard touchdown, right? I'm looking forward to seeing if these guys have the ability to hit the home run then when it's there, and finish the drive. Either way, no disrespect to Miles Sanders, because I did like what he brought here. I love the draft pick. I thought he was a great pick at the time, and he came here. This team's just not going to pay running backs that kind of money, and that's pretty much what happened. But I am looking forward, John, to seeing if we can figure out how much of it was Miles and how much of it was the other two aspects of that equation.
All right, I need a crystal ball prediction for you. Week 1, Eagles at the Patriots. If you got a ticket to the game, you pay through the nose, because it's Tom Brady
Yeah.
Hosanna Day up there in Boston. So they're very expensive if Eagle fans want to go up there and see it. You'll probably be back in studio hosting the Fox pregame stuff. So kickoff goes into the end zone. Patriots get the ball first. They come out 1st and 10 on the 25. What 2 linebackers are on the field for the Eagles? 1st and 10, first play of the season.
Well, I mean, you got to – Kobe Dean has to be one of them. But outside of that to me is one – I feel like that position is unresolved at this point. Howie, whether we want to call this Howie 2.0, 3.0, whatever it is, I think he's got a winning formula right now. He's learned enough to he can massage the salary cap. He can keep these guys happy by restructuring contracts in a way to help get more money, get the team better. And one other thing I think he does well is he just kind of leaves a little bit hanging there. So as you start seeing, like, he's like a hawk circling in the sky. And as a team cuts a guy, he'll dive down and grab him up, right? I think linebacker is one of those spots where I don't know that the second starter is necessarily here yet. I'm sure for week 1 he probably is, but I don't know who that is. I think that's going to be a fun competition to watch as well. And I'm going to be watching Howie as the cuts are starting to be made and you start to see things happen. Don't also, I think that's kind of where that's going to go. I just don't know that other starter throughout the rest of the season is necessarily here yet, because I think Howie is kind of reserved a little bit to address that as needed when other teams have to cut some guys.
At S Grayson, Box 29. Make sure you follow Scott on Twitter. Last one before you get back to dad duty. Scott, host of Props and Locks, by the way, on Box 29. You mentioned linebacker. The Eagles, we went through the salary cap earlier this week. And what was it, Jody? Linebackers were 31 of 32.
Right. Only safeties were less. They were last.
Safety 32 of 32 as far as spending under the cap in the NFL. Howie's 2-time executive of the year, has built perhaps the best roster in football. This is the way he does it. And he says, we just talked about it on the offensive side, it's running backs. On the defensive side, it's linebacker, it's safety. Is he going too far? Should we be concerned about this? Because safety, we just talked, it's Nicholas Morrow. Safety, it's Terrell Edmonds, where he got it the Walmart clearance aisle or Amazon Prime Day, and Reed Blankenship, or you're hoping Sidney Brown, who's a 3rd-round pick. I don't know. I see people in the comments shitting on Miles Sanders. I'm allowed to say shitting. They loved him last year, so they'll turn on you quickly. Now Sidney Brown's an Eagle. He's a 3rd-round pick. You can't expect him to step in week 1 and be Ronnie Lott, can you?
It's funny. It's like they take linebacker. It looks like, right, the appearance. They take linebacker and safety this year, and they say, well, we've got a great defensive line. Like I've often referred to it like in hockey, they can rotate line changes at this point with their defensive line. That we just need guys who can kind of come up and maybe make a tackle. The defensive line will do the work, and they'll just come up and finish the play. At safety, it's like, well, look at the corners we have. These guys just, they just need to kind of babysit the background out there and maybe make a play here and there. You could argue Reed Blankenship did pretty well at that last year when he had the opportunity. And, but it seems like that's almost the attitude they're taking. Safety's the other spot that I think, how he's circling around up in the sky, waiting for guys to drop or potentially get, a good deal on someone at some point. Again, I don't know that the safeties are set that we have right now, that the Eagles have that the starters are there. For week 1, probably, but overall, maybe they're going to go out there and get somebody else. I don't know. Safety, linebacker, I feel like they're treating the same way. It seems like, like we said, it's almost impossible in the salary cap era to build a perfect roster. They've got close to that. Those are the 2 positions that everybody can look at and say, yeah, that's not a completed position right now. And I think safety, to me, It's an important spot on the field. I'll be curious to see what route they go and how it shakes out. I think they've got guys they feel can compete to do what they want back there. But I, again, don't think Howie's done massaging that roster, including at that position.
All right, Scotty, last thing. And I'm going to do a little math there and some guessing. If you're bringing your daughter to Girl Scout camp, I'm guessing you were not alive in 1969. Would that be a correct assumption?
That is correct. I came
were
along
born-
about 10 years later.
10 years later. Good. That's what I figured. So despite the fact that you weren't born or alive in 1969, I'm sure you've heard of man landing on the moon. The first time it happened was 1969.
It wasn't
And they-
real, Jody.
They
Wasn't
did
real.
so without Bluetooth, which made Dallas Goedert question this week
Yeah.
as to whether it actually happened or not, or if it was from the Grassy Nola conspiracy theory that has perplexed people.
Let's
for-
give AJ his credit. AJ brought it up first, so Dallas was just backing up AJ.
Okay, so which do we want to critique more here, AJ Brown or Dallas Goedert, for even opening this can of worms?
Oh, frankly, I think it just shows where these guys are. They are all over the place, but they're mentally, I guess, trying to have some fun with things, and I guess that's a good thing. I don't know who you want to criticize first, because you don't want to criticize either one of them. They're just
I'm
First of
ready
all,
to criticize both of them. I don't give a flying, you know what? If you're going to be stupid enough to say that in front of a microphone, you open yourself for criticism.
You're absolutely right, and that's just. But that goes back to what we talked about, right? The social media.
Social
these days.
media, man. Social
It's-
media.
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a
Yes.
court of public opinion.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean, all the things these guys say, I wonder how much of it comes out too when they're on the field and other teams point it out and say stuff back at them and use it as trash talk. I don't know. It is stupid stuff, and it is crazy what they go.
Did you
with,
guys
but-
see Kadarius Toney this week? He's calling
No.
up Giants fans and berating them and calling them ugly. And he claimed he got hacked, but it sounds like Kadarius. Yeah. I mean, these guys got to get away from social media. They got to get
it's
away.
true.
Well,
They grew up with it.
Going on a podcast and not social media. That's
Well,
actual media.
Yeah.
And if you accept an invite and someone asks you a question, and if you say something dumb enough, you're going to be called on the carpet. And it's not the typewriter muscles that people have on Twitter or whatever. No, that's an actual podcast.
I would
Not
argue
the same
they
thing.
I would argue they get that disinformation from social media, though, because there's a whole
That's why they're saying there was never a landing on
yeah,
the moon,
there's a
because
whole
they
sort
believe
of
what Twitter tells them.
there's a whole sort of conspiracy theorist echo chamber atmosphere, and if you're susceptible to that, you can go down some wormholes and stuff seems believable, and boom, you're off saying dumb stuff on a live mic.
It's obvious we live in some very interesting times these days, and it
Yeah.
scares me as a father having these kids growing up in the kind
Yeah.
of place we are in with everywhere the world is right now. It's nuts.
Yeah.
See, and I
So-
just thought Kyrie Irving was an actual alien,
Yeah.
not from another country, from another planet. So that explained to me
Oh.
about his theories.
I'm
on
still
the Earth
looking
being
to
flat.
drive off the end of the earth. I'm still
Yeah,
looking for the end.
But when Dallas Guy and AJ Brown go there, I just have to shake my
It's
head. and go,
scary.
what the
Yeah,
hell?
it's
What the
scary.
hell? All right,
Well,
Scott
flat Earth.
Grayson.
You didn't think you were getting flat Earth and no moon landing, did you, Scott?
No, that
Not
was
this
not in
one.
my prep work, John.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, when Dallas Goedert says it, it becomes a topic for Birds.
It sure
365.
does. Yeah.
Scotty, great stuff. Appreciate it. We're going to have you plenty on during the season, certainly when camp opens up. We'll try not to hit you on Girl Scout camp days so you
It's the
can
summer.
be in front of the computer. But you did a great job for us here today. Thanks for jumping in from the car. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks,
All right, guys. As always, love it. Thank you.
Scott Grayson, Fox 29 here on Birds 365. All
Yeah,
right.
I didn't know we were going flat Earth and moon landing today. This morning.
I was going to get your opinion, so I figured we had somebody else on the line. We might as well ask them. When I read that stuff, I said, "Really, Dallas? You're really going to go there?" Do you really need
Yeah.
to drag us down
I
to
don't
use
even
Johnny's?
that kind of stuff I don't even take seriously. I just
Here's
snicker
why
and
I
move
take
on.
it seriously. Did you think he was attempting? And I haven't watched or listened to the podcast. I'm only reading the reports on what he said after the fact. Do you think he was going for a laugh?
I didn't listen to it, but I did see some of the clips about him talking about the field in the Super Bowl, and he said on a better field we win 10 times out of 10. And again, aggregators blow that out of proportion. Then I watched the clip and he said, "Well, what do you think I'm going to say? It's my team, and he said, "But we played on the same field." He said all the right things, but they took out the clip out of context and it looks like he's complaining about the field. He wasn't complaining about the field at all. So I didn't see the entire moon landing clip, so I don't know if he's trying to make a joke or not, but I do
Because
know
that to me, that's what you got to know. Whether he was just playing along, and sometimes on
yeah.
these relaxed podcasts, they'll do that.
Yeah,
Guys
sometimes you're
get off on
joking around.
tangents,
Yeah.
they're joking around. If he's
Yeah.
joking around, I got no problem with it.
Yeah.
But
And he might have been. I have no idea. I have no
nor do
idea.
I. But if he wasn't, that's scary to me. If you really do question whether we did or didn't land on the moon, I have to question your intelligence going forward as a football player, a key football player. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to,
Yeah.
and that's pretty apropos to the conversation we're having, I guess here about landing on the moon. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to play in the National Football League, but I just it throws up a red flag to me anytime anybody goes there.
It would throw up a red flag to me only if he was serious about the issue and studied the issue and still believes something like that. There's so many. And by the way, to be fair, I'm not going down the conspiracy route. Our government lies to us all the time. So, and they've been proven. And you go through as recently as COVID-19. There have been people deplatformed for saying things that turned out to be true. That's our government, and that's where these kids are growing up. That's where these kids are growing up. So the extrapolation to them is, well, they're lying about this, they're lying about this, they're lying about that. And it conflates to everything's a lie instead of the rare instances, for whatever reason, political motives, whatever you want to give the reason. Yeah, sometimes we don't get the full truth. That's been, debunked many times. And, if he did the research and still believed it, then I'd have an issue with it. I think it's one of those things, again, where you hear one thing and it's completely one-sided by some wacko conspiracy theorist, and they frame it in a way that, oh, that seems plausible. That's all I think it is. That's all I think it was with Kyrie Irving. I don't think they're doing voluminous work on these issues. So I can't take it. I'm not going to worry about, can Kyrie Irving play basketball? I got a bigger issue with Kyrie Irving because he tends to blow up teams with, some of the things he does in relation to basketball. But he's a hell of a player. I saw him, close out some big stinking games because of his talent. I don't need Dallas Goedert to be an expert on geopolitical affairs, so I don't really care about his political leanings or his conspiracy theorism. Is he one of the best 5 tight ends in football? Yes.
Yeah,
Is he one of the most well-rounded tight ends in football? Yes. I mean, that to me is all that matters.
Landing on the moon science more than politics?
Everything's politics, Jody. Everything. At least in relation to people and the way they think, especially this generation. Everything's politics. You're either right or you're wrong. You're in this echo chamber. You're in that echo chamber. Everything. Everything.
Is Jalen Hurts not wanting to deal with rat poison politics as well?
I don't. Yeah,
How far?
I've
How far are we
never
going to
heard.
take this that everything is politics?
I've never heard Jalen Hurts talk about politics, so I don't know
Well,
if
you
he's
just told me everything is politics, so Jalen Hurts has to be politics
All
as well,
right.
right?
No,
Everything
everything
is in politics.
Well, now you're just getting into the classic Johnny Mac, Jody Mac semantics debate. For people that don't give a shit about politics, they don't give a shit about politics. But for people that talk about, activists, for instance, for people, everything is about politics. Everything is about politics, ideology, identity. You have people that base their whole life on what they're born as. What's your identity? Identity is not an accomplishment. So if you identify as, LBGQT, that's not an accomplishment, but people act like it is. If you identify with your race, that's not an accomplishment, but a lot of people think it is. For people like that, everything's about politics. For people that don't care about politics, and to my knowledge, and I don't know if that's true or not, only because I've never heard Jalen talk about anything in that realm. He doesn't seem like a very political person. I could be wrong, but for people that don't care about politics, they don't care about politics. For people that do, everything's about politics.
Right. There's a percentage of the people in the country. You're right. Everything to them is. I don't think it's as big a percentage as you do, and I'm hoping that's the case with Dallas Goedert, that he was just yucking it up, that this wasn't a political stance of his, that everything's a lie that comes out of including 1969, which shoot, Scott Grayson wasn't born in 1969. I was. We know Dallas Goedert wasn't, but he's gonna draw a conclusion that it was somehow a hoax on the American people. If you're going to say something, I hope that Dallas is bright enough to understand when you say something like that, people are going to question it after the fact. That's my take on Dallas Goedert. I think he's a bright young man, and I hope that's the case. And he was just having some fun yesterday, because what he said I thought was pretty foolish. All right, he's McMullen. I'm McDonald. We are Mac and Mac. Coming back, we've got Clark Judge joining us coming up in about 15 minutes, so you want to stick around for that.